We're going to get started. We've got a bunch to cover today, and because you were so brave to come out, we had a very high amount of people thinking they were going to come with probably a different scenario in the political sphere, but you were all very dedicated to your analytics. Thank you for that. And we will be recording this for our podcast, and some of it on video. So all of your curses and whatnots will be on the record. Keep that in mind. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. So just to start, I want to say very much thank you to Cause Effective and Michael J. Fox Foundation. We're going to be hearing from them right after I go through some of our general analytics, best practices, and ideas for you. Thank you to WeWork. That's where we are right now. This is a co-working space. We co-work. We're right down there. Any other WeWork members here? Girls on the run. Super awesome. Talk to us if you want to learn more about it. Thanks, WeWork. And thanks for the alcohol. Thanks to NPCC, Nonprofit Coordinating Committee. You guys are also amazing. It's a group of nonprofits in New York City providing resources around convening and advocating for nonprofits in New York. Crowdster, these guys also help sponsor it. They are crowdfunding platforms, so if you're doing crowd fundraisers, certainly a lot of them out there. This is one we definitely trust. They're not ripping you off on rates, and they are pretty solid when it comes to crowd fundraising. Okay, donor analytics. Let's talk about this. Quick WWULive. So if you want to sit over here so you can sit these pieces, go up and do it because I feel like I like this spot. I'll range a little bit. I thought that out. I feel like this is the spot today. Wi-Fi code guest and hashtag WWULive. We will have somebody on the internet hanging out on this channel topic. I'm going to talk about the funnel of engagement, Google Analytics goals, echo chambering ads, and then some donor analytics. All right, so some general donor retention data that I think is important to set the stage with here is that this sad stat that on average, this is coming from good folks at AFP and USA Giving, is that we're only retaining about 43% on average of our donors, which is crazy, right? If we were trying to sell some sort of widget or subscription service and we were losing almost half of our people every year, that's just nuts. And of the people that are first-time donors to organizations in general, we're only keeping 20% of them. That means like 1 in 5 people, 5 of you right here, give me $10, and 4 of you are like, I really don't like that guy, I'm never coming back. That's not a business. It's a crazy stat if you're looking at it on average. And then finally, younger organizations that are under 5 years retain 40% of donors. And so this is a little bit more of a reminder that to the newer people getting started, there's a bit of a hurdle with messaging around brand story, around loyalty, why we need to support over time versus this one and done. You can find all of these data and a heck of a lot more. These are just 3 salient facts at the afbfep.org/reports. Don't worry, we're also going to be sending out this presentation, and also we are recording. Right, Ann?
We are.
Yes. Thank you, Ann. Alrighty, this quote really summarizes, though it's a little long, the biggest issue I think that we have right now with analytics, donor analytics. This idea that information consumes our attention of its recipients. Hence, the wealth of it creates a poverty of attention. The more stuff there is, the less we pay attention to. If there were like 6 of me up here running around spouting things at you, you would be like, this is a circus, I'm leaving. And so this happens with all of the available analytics that we have at our disposal. I know I should be looking at my CRM. I know I should be looking at my web data. I know it. And suddenly you look at nothing because you can't look at a single point. So drawing out these salient facts, I think it's really good to remind ourselves of the 80-20. We're familiar with this in general, some head nods. We get it. It's applied to everything. Sometimes over-applied, but very much accurate in this idea that we're, with regard to our work, going to do 20% of things, 100% of things, but only 20% of that effort is going to lead to the majority of results. If I did a general distribution of all of your Twitter followers, boom that, probably even more so. It would probably be a 10-90. If I looked at all of your donors in aggregate, if you had a sample size that was reasonable, it would fall into this distribution. And the same thing with our work. Today's really going to focus around what that 80-20 type of work is when we're talking to the good people from Cause Effective and Michael J. Fox Foundation, but also looking at our approaches. So keep this in the back of your mind. Ask yourself this question. Walk away with, if I were to put the 100 things I'm doing, what is it that I think, with regards to fundraising, is going to yield this type of result? Part of this for us is defining and understanding the impact chasm. This is what we do on this side. It's day to day, firing through some emails, and maybe posting some new content. And then over here, the outcome. Maybe it's fundraising or in our larger idea. It's the outcome we have, the change we want to see in the world, fewer, pets left in shelter. So we are defining this, but we have to cross this chasm. We have to cross this chasm with predictive indicators, with data that we can actually measure to tell if any of this type of work is leading there. When I think about the funnel strategy, and we talk about analytics, and we talk about these elements going from aware, interested, engaged, to then finally committed, people donating to your organization, we have to keep in mind what are the key steps here. Because if we run around the internet saying, hey, will you give to me? Hey, will you give to me? It's kind of like asking someone to marry you on the first date. It's a little nutty, right? If I go up to you and I say, hey, will you marry me? And you're like, no. I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. You don't really know me. It's illogical. We have to go through this first dating phase. We have to see if we're going to move forward. And so when you apply this from a digital advertising strategy, say, and a lead acquisition from our website, aware may be people that are just visiting our site, so we can look at sessions and users. So I move down. Are people interested? Are they giving us the permission to talk to them? So you can't see this, but this is at this point where I'm getting email signups for my newsletter. I'm getting people to click and follow me on Facebook or Twitter. They're getting a little bit more into our story. And that's where you can jump to engaged. What are the click-through rates? What are the open rates that we're getting from our messaging? What is that type of re-engagement we're seeing on our site with people that come back and are reminded of our story? On this side, we're thinking about telling good stories, calls to action. And on this side, we're analyzing our communications. And then finally, we're looking at donor behavior and creating giving moments. Any questions on this as a strategy? Someone had previously asked, how does web traffic kind of potentially relate to donors? Defining this for yourself is definitely step one. And step two, one of the lowest hanging bits of fruit, especially for new nonprofits, is the google.com/nonprofits grant, the Google AdWords grant that you can get to drive free traffic to your website to the tune of $10,000 a month. But we can go even deeper on this. So here's our aware engagement. I stopped before. I stopped on just the, hey, someone's donated to you once, and I just told you only 1 in 5 of those humans is going to potentially return to you next year. So if you're just letting people drop out of the bottom of the funnel and just focus on that, you're forgetting our 80-20. The fact that somebody's already bought from you is much more likely to buy again. Don't ignore them. Where do we spend our time now? Are we thinking about our re-engagement strategy, our segmentation? And that's where some of these tactics come into play. So I want to start with Google Analytics. First off, how many of you know what Google Analytics are? Good. Thank you for being mostly honest. It's tracking code that's across every single page of our site, free from Google, thank you, google.com/analytics. And it's, without it, basically looking at our good old Bravo supermarkets here from above. So we can't tell what's going inside our supermarket. You're the supermarket owner. Once I put analytics in here, suddenly I can see people shopping around different aisles, going in and saying, hey, I'm going to check out this type of sale, go over to this aisle. And once we set up goals, properly configure Google Analytics, then we get into this happy little family choosing this exact melon in that exact aisle on that exact time, day, geographic location from that source. We get super targeted. And then we can tell what drove them. And then what we can do to drive more of them. We have to define these goals. When I talk about configuration, I'm talking about goals inside of Google Analytics. And this is when we set something specific inside of there that says, hey, when somebody clicks this donate button, when somebody signs up for an email, I want you to track this inside of Google Analytics. And the same thing in a soccer game. It doesn't matter who has the most shots on goal or who has the ball for the longest. It's who scores the most goals. To make a really sad analogy, it's not the popular vote, it's the electoral college. It's the goals. So, trying not to depress you too much, Power Poetry. One of the largest organizations for teens and poetry online, creating a safe place for people to share their work. This is the website. The sole goal is really to get you to be engaged or also as a donor. We set this up inside of Google's goals. We create a new goal. We point to these different elements on the site that when somebody fills out a form, as a reminder, say, hey, I think we should set that up as a goal so we can tell what's going on. When someone clicks the donate button and it potentially goes to that completion page, if we set that up as a goal, we can tell who, when, where, how they got there in aggregate. We can also then do segments inside of Google Analytics that look at all of our data, but with like different sort of like rose-colored glasses, or blue glasses, or green glasses, and say, hey, let me see all the people that maybe came from schools, or government, or press. And for the purpose of today, I can actually create a way of looking at my site for what would be potentially richer users, high net worth users looking at our content. Traffic, all traffic is not created equally. Sometimes I care a lot more if someone spends 3 minutes on the site versus a bounce. Someone just came to one page and immediately left. Segmenting is where we get all of the value from our data. And this doesn't just reside in Google Analytics. I want to talk about an echo chambering tactic that Whole Whale has been testing and rolling out based on political strategies that have been used in year over year in the recent past, where they basically surround their target audience with impressions. Think land, sea, and air, omni-channel marketing, where any way they possibly can, they're saying, all right, let's send our direct mail piece, our email, our social. Let's really focus on this type of user and the message that we should be hitting them with, because we know if we can surround them, they're getting as much as a 30% lift on overall conversion with regard to at least fundraising appeals. So that means they're sending out mass mail in one market and saying, I wonder if anyone's going to give back through that mail piece. And then in another market, they're saying, hey, let's do a bunch of targeted advertising with regard to surrounding them and seeing if there's any lift. So there is a precedent here. To execute this, why echo chambering ads? You know, I'm talking about this omni-channel marketing, but this is a sad truth, frankly, of human behavior, that we tend to trust what is familiar. You're walking down the aisle in the supermarket and you're looking at a Pepsi versus I've never heard of them before, and you're like, you know what, I've seen a billion ads at this point for Pepsi. One of the things that Coca-Cola marketing representatives usually have figured out is that there's like a 7 positive impression score that they're trying to hit for a target audience to then say, all right, this person's more likely to choose my shitty cola off the wall than that other one. And we're employing these same types of tactics. It means that there's a hint when I've seen it enough times that then I get this appeal. Even if you're a new organization, I've seen them before, they're trustworthy. We make this often, sadly, incorrect assumption that just because I've seen someone's name a billion times and it's been promoted again and again and again in the media, and we have this self-fulfilling shit prophecy that amplifies it, we have an assumption of trust. And you need to be very careful with that. But use it for good, because people are using it for evil out there. This is how you do it. We're going to be reminding our audience that we are awesome, and we're going to do it at least to 7 impressions, and this is how we use hyper-targeted digital advertising to do it. We're going to create rich district segments. You can actually go and get this automatically. We've already created this segment for you at bit.ly/richga, cap sensitive. And what this is going to do, it's going to create a segment of your Google Analytics that will then let you advertise against the traffic that's already coming to your site. Now, keep in mind, we're making the following assumption, that these places have a lot of money, which they do as far as cities. All traffic is not created equally. So that means if I had $100 to spend, you know what? I would rather remind the people from rich, targeted areas that we have a donate button, that we're doing amazing work, that I'm telling my story. So acknowledge that this is an assumption that you can refine and build on it, but it's a starting point. Next, we can build the remarketing segment inside of AdWords and then run those ads. So that rich segment can then be brought across, once you've defined it, into an AdWords account. Now, those of you that are super savvy on this, you're saying, can I do this with a Google AdWords grant? You can't. Fortunately, it's very restrictive. But there are ways of creating those targeted geographic regions, but it won't necessarily pull over the remarketing data. If you are I'm using the word remarketing. Is that going over anyone's head? Okay. Remarketing is using the cookies from your website's users, saying, hey, this cookie, which by the way expires after about 2 years, this cookie is on this user. Now it can track you around the internet and serve up relevant ads to those people. Okay, so we're retargeting these users that have already seen us before. You can also include things like have somebody gone to our /donate page in the last 2 years. Let's remind them that it's giving season again. Remember, the cookie lasts for 2 years. Your retention rate for new donors is 20%. Stop me if you have questions, because I'm going quickly because we have great people to talk to. Email, donor, data, and Facebook ads. So, Facebook advertising is super creepy. I'm going to put it out there. You can segment based on demographics, based on wealth, and this is just an example. Like, I can literally filter against liquid assets that I can tell of its users in the segments of over $3 million. So again, if you're targeting your ads or your ad group, you can use a Facebook pixel, toss it on your site, but you can also create a donor email list. That means you can just rip your email list of donors, toss them into a Facebook targeting ad, and if any of those emails match up with users on Facebook, you can set an ad to chase them around the internet. I'm going to say that one more time, so you're really following here. This is super creepy. This is what other people do. This is how you sell widgets to more humans and do nonsense, and this is how we're going to use it for good. Use Facebook ads. We're building this audience based on our email list, and then we create test message ads across Facebook and Instagram that chase our target audience that is already somewhat familiar with us against that. And then here's a hint, short videos drive cheaper impressions. So if you have that little video package that talks about how you're doing, it's actually going to be able to track the 15 seconds that someone has seen that before. And it will also give you the total number of impressions that has been shown to that person before. And you can play with that number as well. So
When you say chase, it's going beyond Facebook and Instagram?
It's only on Facebook and Instagram. But fortunately, people spend a stupid amount of time on that platform. So it also gives very, very accurate data in terms of that. You can create different types of ads, but remember this is an impression play. So what you may not see from this is a direct donation from Facebook. So when you're looking at your data, you're like, wait a minute, no one's clicking and immediately giving. Again, this is assuming that it's in addition to, not instead of, an existing digital ask or direct mail ask that you have of these people. We're surrounding them on all of these platforms. Looking for looks of confusion. There's some people taking furious notes. Good balance. Yes?
George, is there ever a point of diminishing returns? When you mentioned the creepiness factor, is there ever a point where someone may feel, wait a minute, they're seeing it too much and it starts to bother them and turns them off? How do you know when you've gotten to that point?
So the question is, how do you tell if you're being too creepy or too annoying that you're surrounded? This is not interruption advertising, and so you don't run into that as much. And in the same token, that's more seen when I'm maybe posting like 100 times a day about donate here on my Facebook page. This is something that is just simply quietly following them around on the side of feeds and in that way. You can also see inside of the impression as the CTR starts to go down or the cost starts to play a little bit up once the impressions get too high, the impressions per unique person. Yes?
Instagram is interesting to me. Do people actually click on those?
The question is, Instagram, yeah, sure, cool. Does anyone click on that?
Yeah.
No.
Doesn't have to.
Remember the goal. What is the goal?
For it to be seen?
I
A
want
positive impression?
I want the number of positive impressions over the people that matter most. The people sitting there with over $1 million in liquid assets just hanging out. The value of that impression suddenly is different than a general advertising. Sure, some people click on it. I'm not assuming that we're going to get random people searching around their feed of cute cats and puppies, suddenly feeling they want to donate, unless you're some sort of animal shelter.
Right.
Good question. Right. So on donor targeting, it's important to note when we define our audience, if we get too specific, we'll throw off our cost. And so other ways of building up before, as I was saying in the same tone, that we could increase it on the Google side. On Facebook, what we can do is include our Facebook page audience, so tag that in and build that up onto our audience. We can also use the Facebook tracking pixel for remarketing. Remarketing, as we just learned, is saying, hey, this user was on our website, and let's use that same cookie to then target ads at them. So you can build that up so that you get a little higher into an audience definition so you're not overpaying for that type of targeting. Okay. Any other questions? Here's some questions to ask. Here's the process of looking at data. I talked about before we have this wealth of information, what are we going to do with it all? Here's a process. It's by no means super unique, but there are important points that I want to talk about. Gathering data, making sure analytics is set up properly. We can't ask these questions if you're not tracking your final donation page. You're effectively playing a game where there's no goal. People just kick the ball around. It's quite silly. I think it's called rugby. Ask questions. This is what we're going to go through, asking the right questions, getting different departments to ask those questions, then chasing down the answer through analysis, insights, and then act. What are we doing now that we know this thing? Are we going to segment better? Are we going to redesign a donation fund? So here are some questions to spit out. What about donors by location? We already talked about high net worth individuals. We can actually see how regions across the country are engaging with our site, breaking down location in the geographic settings. We can see New York down to San Diego, getting on average a conversion rate of 7%. We can ask questions like, why are we over or under indexing? What types of content are they looking at? We can see what's resonating and then do more of it. Next, we can look at assisted conversion. So what if people don't convert on the first visit? It's totally possible. I just talked about the fact that pretty much no one's going to say, I will marry you on the first date. That would be weird. What assisted conversions do is once you've set up goals inside of Google Analytics, it's able to tell the different steps that went into you eventually converting. So it's not just the first or last click. It is saying, all right, if somebody came to my website 3 times over the last, let's say, 60 days, it can track that entire thing that led up to the final donation or goal conversion. I have Michael Jordan up here because, first off, he's just, a great basketball player. The fun thing about Michael Jordan with regard to statistics is that every other player on the court, when he came on there, their average scores went up because his assists were incredible, he drew the defense, and this is the analogy I'm making here, that Facebook and Twitter are not necessarily doing that first click conversion, but they can help with the assists. They can support the other cross-channel marketing that you happen to be doing, and Google Analytics actually will show you that overlap if you have set up goals properly. Questions on this? Heady topic. Few people end up using this. Great. All right. You can see, for example, when I look at top conversion paths then, something like this particular passage here was organic search. So someone typed in something relevant to your organization, and then maybe 2-3 weeks later, came back on a direct search saying, oh, I remember that organization. They're really great. Let me type it in and go there. And then they did it again, and then they converted. And this will figure out that path with regard to the cross-channel marketing efforts that went into it. So this is trying to break this assumption of the last click fallacy. That there was just like one magical moment where someone's like, I have found you for the first time and now I shall give you my money done. That doesn't happen. It is a complex path that ends up coming through this process.
Quick question. Are you saying that once you get, you set your goal, okay, they clicked on donate, and you can backtrack from that and say, okay, who and where were they throughout the process when they first showed up?
Yes, the question is, can you backtrack? So someone donates on your site and you see that somebody went to the, let's say, donor/thank you page of my site, which means they made some level of contribution. What you can see in aggregate are the different paths that person went through, not just the pages, but tracking back 90 days. What were the different things that brought that person, that event eventually converted? What events have brought that person to that inevitable goal completion? It will not give you their user information when I say aggregated, but that's fine because you can do analysis on that. You can realize that organic to email reminder to then direct traffic donate is like really working, for instance. And you can see how your different marketing efforts are lending toward that ultimate goal together.
Is there a path that's more common than others, or a combination of channels?
So the question is there a path more common than others? I hate the answer, but it depends. What I normally see is based on the volume of marketing that you're doing up front. So at the top of the funnel, there are 5 main sources of traffic that are doing that initial handshake. More often than not, it's organic traffic that's doing that first initial handshake. I'm looking for information, resources, facts. I'm looking for some sort of, general awareness type of search, and then I end up on that site. So for example, I'm searching for Parkinson's awareness facts, Parkinson's symptoms potentially, and then I go down that path, dealing with that search and then that relationship phase. They sign up for an email newsletter, and then 9 to 18 months later, cycle time wise, they may become a donor. Now, I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but in that certain case, the timeline for this may expire, so it will be coming from email. So it depends. Next up, here's a really good question to be asking this time of year. How is our donation funnel doing? So many of us have multi-step donation forms. And we just assume that once somebody gets to a donation form, they're going to give money. Obviously, you went to the donation form. Simply not true. A lot of it, sadly, will look like this. Every single form you put there, every single step that you get in the way of somebody clicking that donate button, you're potentially losing 90% of the people. And you're like, I don't believe it. Believe it. You're lazy. In aggregate, you personally are not lazy. The other 40 people that signed up to come tonight, that's called the drop-off. They got to that initial page, they fill out a form, they're not here. I mean, hi from home, like, joke's on us. You want to set up the funnel for your donations so that you can see where you're losing people and actually bring data to bear on that. Because think about it, if I'm able to, at the top of this funnel, optimize it and, even reduce it by half, what did I just do to the top of the funnel? I just doubled the effective fundraising I'm doing, the value of all of that traffic, just because humans are lazy on that form. It's crazy, but when we're talking about 80-20, if you ask me to help your fundraising campaign, I'm going to the choke point where the biggest drop-off in terms of value is in your fundraising funnel. You do all this work to nurture the lead, and then they get to an awful-looking form, which they then give up on life on. Well, not 11% of them. Okay, some other questions to ask, because I'm not covering everything, I'm covering a good amount that I may be teasing these guys with. But some questions to be looking at and thinking about are frequency of gift, of lifetime donor value, average gift, retention, the email to donor cycle time, meaning like I sign up as a new person on your newsletter, how long is it going to take me to become a donor? Industry is between 9 and 18 months, but that is a huge range. It's good to know that. What is their capacity to give? You can use data appending, aka mass stalking, as it were, to figure out the total wealth of the individual pieces of data in your database. Yeah, tons of questions. If we're doing specific analysis in our donor database, there's a tool Whole Whale likes to use called Fundraising Report Card. There's a free version of it. You can toss in your data and segment it a bunch of different ways. So questions like how have donations changed over time and at what value? Playing with slicing, dicing your data and help you find insights. Help you determine how and why you're asking your audience to give. Another one, are we acquiring new donors? Remember, what is that based on that benchmark? We toss in our fundraising data and we get certain pieces like this. Hey, 5 new donors gave 5,000 or more in 2015. A lot of this is nice, but so what, unless you move through that circle and say, what do we do now? Are we segmenting? Are we talking to them differently than other donors? Donors lapsing on the south side here, we can also look and say, hey, can we reach out to the 2015 donors with hyper-targeted messaging and tactics? Can we take these people and make sure we surround them with an ask, reminding them, hey, you gave last year, renew your commitment to us. I use that word renew because it's tested very, very well for getting lapsed donors to renew their commitment to you, because it reminds them in terms of how they had already, as an individual, identified with your organization. Who's downgrading? Who's getting cheaper year over year? Which might be a signal for, wait a minute, they may be doing multi-gifts. There may be one more gift planned. Donor sticking around, stickiness. And then what is our donor's lifetime value? I think this is one of the more overlooked ones. We're such a one and done. All right, we met our fundraising goal, we're done. We forget about the lifetime customer value that someone has. Right? If I donate once, is it just that, or is it going to hit an average of 3 to 5x that initial value? And how am I against that amount? It's a completely different game when you're thinking about acquisition year over year of somebody, if you're able to keep them and their lifetime value to your organization. So don't forget donor lifetime value. Okay. Reminder of statistics, because I'm going to be getting your impressions of this. And I want to, do interview time. I'm right on schedule. This is great. Any other questions before we move into this next phase?
Yeah, I had a question.
Perfect.
So you don't see the donor information, but you are going to see the dollar amount. So you will be able to say, here are the number of people who did donate $5,000 or whatever.
Yeah, so the question is, going back to the donor fundraising report card, you can slice it and dice it, and then it's your own data that you put in there. And so this is giving you the aggregate insight to then say, oh, let me just filter for the people that gave $5,000 in this way, and you can export these data. There may be a paywall in there somewhere, but I think it's worth it if you're able to get it. We're talking like $39 a month-ish. Is that true? They'll yell at me if I was wrong. They are not afraid of that. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm trying to put this into context of sort of behavioral economics and sort of a lot of research showing that demographics and psychographics are becoming less relevant to predicting behavior, in this case purchases or donations, versus just behavioral graphics. Are you finding that to be true in your analysis of with your clients? Are you being able to find any macro trends among behavioral graphics that are useful or actionable for those who are sitting on databases trying to find places to analyze?
Yeah, so the question is twofold if I understand it. One is a psychodemographic versus a behavioral analytic, and saying, all right, in the good old days, it was like, you know what, who's going to give to us? Women ages 35 to 55 that have 2.5 kids and live in this region. You know what, who's going to give to you? People that have given to you before. So the type of behavior is definitely something I hedge toward. There's absolutely ways that you can use Facebook to get demographic information of your donor list, but simply narrowing by, all right, only this type of person gives to me, why would you do that? If they are the type of person that gives to you and has given to you, they're much more likely to then continue to do so. So things that back that up are the fact that volunteers are 10 times more likely to give to an organization than someone who's never volunteered with that organization before. This is kind of obvious when you say it, but that's a behavior. I don't care what the demographic of that volunteer is. They have a pre-existing relationship. Hey, why don't we take that entire volunteer list we have of all the people that like walk our pets and pet sit and throw that into our donor database? I'd much rather see that than hey, let's reach women 35 to 55 that have a high net worth of $1 million in these areas. If they're going to give, they're going to give. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, well,
I mean, as best I can, I guess.
yeah, so and behavioral economics sort of how a lot of the work that I'm doing is kind of focused on. And then the difficulty is at what point do we just completely throw out demographic and psychographics and purely look, like for instance, when it comes to like Procter & Gamble and how they do the brand management, they only look at behaviors. And I'm finding in the donation, we don't have data to look only at behaviors at our organization, at least I haven't found out how to do it. And I saw a lot of demographic information or psychographic, here. So are we going to reach that point where we catch up with sort of the corporate approach of purely behavioral-based prediction models of behavior? I think that makes sense.
So the question is the nonprofit sector going to catch up with the for-profit sector with regard to this type of more advanced usage? And first off, I challenge the one versus the other. It's, in my mind, always in addition to, not instead of. Because once I have that behavior, then I kind of want to know who they are, because we haven't even gotten to the storytelling. I can't tell the same story to everybody. I'm not going to get the same Christmas present for my nephew that I'm going to get for my wife. That would be weird. He doesn't even fit into lingerie. That's silly. So you don't want to throw that information away just because that's what you're doing. And I also challenge you to say there's plenty of dumb for-profits out there just throwing money into the wind simply because they have it, but they also have tremendous resources at times to have analytics departments. I'm excited though to hear and for you to hear about some of these ninjas that we're about to talk to.